I wanted to ask you about Joshua Boyle, a Canadian who was kidnapped along with his American wife 5 years ago at the Afghanistan border. His family is extremely worried that his case has fallen off your government's radar. They're so worried they even launched a social media campaign to get politicians of all political parties to just say Joshua Boyle's name. Has his case fallen off your radar, and will you say his name?
I am happy to report that this government takes very, very seriously all consular issues, Canadians in difficulty around the world, and I can assure everyone that I have regular updates on the Coleman-Boyle case. This is a situation that we continue to take very, very seriously as we engage with regional partners and international friends and allies to try and get both Joshua Boyle and Mrs. Coleman home safe, along with their children. This is something that is very much on the government's radar. I can't imagine what they're going through, much less their families, and I salute everyone's efforts to raise the profile, but I can assure you the profile is already very much raised. I get regular updates on all consular issues, including the Boyle-Coleman case.
And just to follow up, is there anything you can disclose specifically about your government's efforts beyond what you just said?
The issue is, of course, that while we work on these cases, often it's fairly sensitive, and I would not want to comment on things that could put in danger the work that we are doing. But rest assured, we are working very hard with partners and allies to try and solve this and many others.
Yesterday, the United States government, working with the government of Pakistan, secured the release of Caitlin Coleman, Joshua Boyle, and their 3 children from captivity from the Haqqani Network, a terrorist organization with ties to the Taliban. The Pakistani government's cooperation is a sign that it is honoring America's wish that it do more to provide security in the region. And I want to thank the Pakistani government. I want to thank Pakistan. They worked very hard on this, and I believe they're starting to respect the United States again. It's very important. I think right now, a lot of countries are starting to respect the United States of America once again. We hope to see this type of cooperation and teamwork in helping secure the release of remaining hostages and in our future joint counterterrorism
After being held
operations.
hostage for more than 5 years, an American woman, her Canadian husband, and the 3 children they had in captivity are now free. But tonight, they remain in Pakistan. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon tonight with a look at why. Good evening, Jennifer.
Good evening, Brett. The U.S. military had planned to fly Caitlin Coleman, her husband Josh Boyle, and their 3 children to a U.S. military base where they could be examined by doctors before returning to the U.S. But I'm told Coleman's husband, who is Canadian, refused to board the U.S. military plane, fearing the U.S. government would arrest him. Boyle was once married to the sister of al-Qaeda-linked Guantanamo prisoner Omar Khadr. The release of Coleman, Boyle, and their 3 young children, all born in captivity, took place inside Pakistan. They were released to Pakistani forces based on a tip from the U.S. government.
I want to thank the Pakistani government. I want to thank Pakistan. They worked very hard on this, and I believe they're starting to respect the United States again.
In 2012, Coleman and her husband were hiking outside Kabul in a Taliban stronghold. She was 7 months pregnant at the time. The family was held for 5 years by the Haqqani Network, a Taliban offshoot with ties to Pakistan's intelligence service.
They've been essentially living in a hole for 5 years.
Last night in Pennsylvania, not far from where Caitlin Coleman is from, President Trump hinted at the good news.
Something happened today where a country that totally disrespected us called with some very, very important news.
The family was last seen in this hostage video in December, pleading for then-President Obama to help them. Don't become another Jimmy Carter, Coleman begged. 2 more American hostages are being held hostage by the same Haqqani cell. Last year, Navy SEALs attempted to rescue an American professor in eastern Afghanistan and a man from Massachusetts. U.S. officials tell me this was a negotiated release, not a military rescue by either the U.S. or Pakistani military. The State Department has been pressuring the Pakistani government to use its influence on the Haqqani group for some time, Brett.
Jennifer Griffin, live.
Picture of peace today as 4-year-old Najeshi Jonah Boyle sleeps in the first place he can truly call home, his grandparents' house in Canada. Until this week, the only life he and his 2 siblings knew was captivity in Afghanistan. His father, Joshua Boyle, speaking out about the hostage ordeal publicly for the first time, telling NBC News exclusively they had lived in an underground dungeon, just 66 square feet, dripping water, their food and beds covered in thick mold. Their captors murdering the couple's 4th child, a baby girl.
The stupidity and the evil of the Haqqani network's kidnapping of a pilgrim and his heavily pregnant wife was eclipsed only by the stupidity and evil of authorizing the murder of my infant daughter and the subsequent rape of my wife.
Tonight, the Pakistani military released new video showing the family a day after being freed. The couple was kidnapped while backpacking through Afghanistan in 2012. Caitlin Coleman was 7 months pregnant when they were taken by the Haqqani network, a faction of the Taliban. Her father slamming his son-in-law for bringing her to Afghanistan.
You know, taking your pregnant wife to a very dangerous place, it's unconscionable.
While there are many unanswered questions about the family's harrowing experience, tonight Joshua tells NBC News they're grateful for going from death row to a new lease on life. Lucy Kaplan.
Joshua and Caitlin Boyle are near here, home where they're staying with their 3 young children. They're attempting to start over and adjust to what must be an unimaginable shock. This morning, we're getting a first look inside their new lives.
Held hostage in Afghanistan for 5 years, Canadian Joshua Boyle and his American wife, Caitlin Coleman, are back in Canada this morning. For their children, who have only lived in captivity, it's the start of a new life. Najeshi Jonah Boyle is 4 years old. He's never had toys or books, has never heard of Mickey Mouse.
He doesn't actually understand that there's a sun outside. So forget Mickey Mouse, we're dealing with the basics. It's not welcome to the Western world, it's not welcome to Canada, it's welcome to life.
Caitlin Coleman remains secluded, not yet speaking publicly, her husband providing this photograph. Boyle says for his wife, it's still too soon to talk about what happened.
Her religious faith gets her through, and I think that and her love of being a mother.
Boyle says the couple traveled to Afghanistan in 2012 to help villagers living under Taliban rule, but were kidnapped by militants. Pregnant at the time of their abduction, Caitlin gave birth to 2 sons and a daughter in captivity. According to Boyle, the couple also had another daughter, who was killed by their captors. The decision to travel to the war zone infuriated members of Caitlin's family. Since their release, new attention is being focused on Boyle's life before the abduction. At one point, he was briefly married to the sister of Omar Qatar, the only Canadian held by the United States at Guantanamo Bay, serving as a family spokesman. Qatar was released. The Canadian government determined he was being held unjustly. Today, Boyle describes the horror his family endured, imprisoned by a notorious terror group.
We'd be kept in a chicken coop that they've sort of armored up. The worst of them were underground, filled with water.
And even though they now have all the space they could want, they all still sleep together in this one small bedroom. Their children still eating off the floor. Boyle worries they are scarred after years of brutal treatment. He and his wife gradually helping them to adapt to their new way of life.
So what we're seeing now is really what happens when a child goes its entire life without even a concept of what hoping for better is, because they don't know that better can even exist.
Boyle says they are looking for help with this difficult transition and reaching out to psychologists, but honestly, their situation is so unique. They're really in uncharted territory. Guys, back to you.
Stephanie Gosk, incredible story. Thank you very much.